Hi guys, and welcome to another episode. Today I have the honor and the pleasure of speaking to a BP that I've been wanting to speak to for a long time, and that of course is Greymass. So I'm joined by Scott and Aaron, and I want to welcome you, but I first want to kick it off with kind of the same question that I like to kick things off with typically, and that's basically just kind of, I know you guys are really well known in the community for the Greymass wallet, but I also know that there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that maybe you don't get the proper accolades from. So I'm hoping maybe during this chat we'll be able to speak about that. But I kind of refer to you guys as like the unsung heroes of the EOS ecosystem. So I guess, you know, how did you guys come to find EOS? What are your backgrounds? And when was kind of the aha moment when you realized that you wanted to be an EOS BP?
We both have been kind of in this space for a while. We individually are Steam witnesses, and we're also witnesses on a number of other blockchains. And witnesses are very, very similar to what block producers are in EOS. EOS kind of upped the game a little bit, where block producers are actually organizations instead of individuals. So I think it was probably April of this year. We had been both individually following EOS for a while, but we started having a conversation about like, maybe we should start an organization. Like individually, we've done great things. What if we could build an organization that could combine both of our experiences and then bring other people into that organization and build this new kind of block producer? So that's kind of where we got.
Yeah, another thing that's to build off of that is that we were both Steam witnesses, and it's important to remember that Steam was Dan's last project along with Ned. And from being Steam witnesses for over 2 years now, we have that technical expertise. We have the understanding of the fundamentals that have been building this EOS system for so long. And we come in here with actual knowledge of how the structure works before it's even like launched. So we've been able to help guide people and teach other block producers certain aspects that they may not have first understood, simply because we just had the experience for that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. You guys are, you know, doing some really amazing things in the community. And of course, the Greymass wallet was one of the first wallets that I ever came to use. But as, again, kind of, you know, as I said, you guys do a heck of a lot more than just the wallet. And that's kind of why we're having this chat today. But before we dig too deep into that, we're going to have a little bit of fun. People want to get to know who you are, what you guys, you know, what you're into. And I know it's kind of a weird question. There's not a lot of fun time when you're in this space. But if you do have the time to carve out a few minutes in your day or an hour or two, whatever it may be, what do you guys do when you're not working on EOS?
I tend to end up playing video games. That's kind of my go-to. And also things like cooking. Love exploring different kinds of foods, and it's that creation aspect of it, which is kind of bleeds right back into EOS.
For me, I have to say it's the same. There's some common trend among developers and us nerds with video games. So I'm a big gamer. I like to play video games. But I also, the next biggest thing would be travel and photography. I have a nice little camera, and I like to take it with me wherever I go and learn how to take better pictures. And if you've followed me on Steam before, you'll see a bunch of like travel photography blogs where I talk about some of the travel I've done. I really enjoy that. I'm not the greatest photographer, but some of the shots that I take, I feel proud of. So that's a fun thing for me.
Yeah, it's funny. I grew up with like a bunch of varied interests myself. I grew up obviously, you know, doing some sports and stuff like that, but I always loved video games, you know, StarCraft, Warcraft, Diablo, all those kind of things. There's so many cool video games that are kind of coming out on EOS and things that are being developed right now. I just wish I had more time to spend checking a lot of them out, but unfortunately, just, you know, as you guys are well aware, of course, we're all super busy, so I get it. And ironically, the photography thing, I can relate. I, of course, live in Costa Rica, originally Canadian, do a ton of traveling, but I really like the drone thing. Like I bought one of those little Phantom 4 Pros, and I fly that. That thing comes with me everywhere, so I totally get it.
I've got a little toy one that I'm practicing on. I can't wait to get myself a big one, but I don't want to ruin it, so I've been practicing.
Yeah, I've lost probably 4 Mavics, so definitely becomes a pretty expensive hobby after a little while. But no, I get it. I totally enjoy that as well. So that's cool to know. What do you guys? I know we're going to start off with the wallet. Why has the wallet kind of become one of the most trusted wallets in the ecosystem? Do you guys think? Why is that?
I think a lot of that trust transferred over from our various other projects. As a witness on Steam, I also built a wallet for Steam. So there is this track record of a couple years now where the people that have been in Steam, if they wanted a desktop wallet, they ended up using the wallet that I created. And the community has never had issues with trusting me and, worry that I'm going to, do something malicious with the code or anything. So I think that gave us a little bit of a leg up in the beginning, because there's crossover in crypto. The people that are in EOS aren't exclusively EOS holders. They also are involved in various other tokens, and a lot of them also came from Steam. So there were a lot of people in the very early days when EOS first launched that were, standing on their pedestals and preaching that they should be using our wallet just because they knew me, they knew Scott, and they're like, well, we trust these two guys more than we know anyone else. So I think that kind of gave us a little bit of an advantage in the beginning, and now people are beginning to trust other wallets and start using other things, and it's great. It's great that EOS has so many different choices for wallets.
Yeah, it is indeed. Oh, sorry. Go ahead there, Scott. I love your wallet. I use your wallet. It's my favorite.
I wanted to add on to it what Aaron just last said about having more options now. We're seeing like really good options come out, especially for mobile, because we're obviously strictly desktop for now. But we've seen like super easy to use ones like EOS Links. We've seen a whole bunch of other ones, and of course Scatter is still really, really popular on the desktop for interfacing with dapps. But what people have found is that when they're using our wallet, they realize how privacy and secure focused it is, and they really like that aspect of it. So you might have your Scatter account, but it's your checking account, whereas your savings account, that's on your Greymass wallet, where you have a separate air-gapped computer with your cold wallet signing over there. And it's like, no, that's secure. And people have realized that this is the option to go if you want security and privacy.
Yeah, I think some of the sustainability too from people continuing to use your wallet comes to the fact that I watch a lot of people come in your chat room and they say, hey, I'd like to be able to stake this, or I'd like to be able to do this. And you guys just do it. You just make it happen. You know what I mean? You're accommodating, like you recognize the need to kind of adapt and move and just really accommodating to the community with your wallet. So I've noticed that as well. And that's one thing that I really respect about you guys. Another thing that I really respect about you guys is the fact that you guys have a keen interest in governance. And of course, that has now been kind of brought into the wallet itself, right? How exactly does the wallet kind of implement referendum tools? And are you guys considering any further implementations for the wallet, either along those lines or otherwise, in the near future?
Yeah, right now we are trying to just basically make it a interface that will allow you to participate. That was kind of when we first built the wallet, that's what it was all about. It was about getting you to stake, or I guess you were already staked, but then enabling you to vote in block producer voting. Like, it was about that initial connection. And then we've improved it since with things like proxies and browsing proxies now, and the producer JSON smart contract that gives you all the details about each producer. While we're at that like initial stage with referendum right now, we're just trying to get you to the point where you can vote on a referendum. We do want to expand on that functionality in the future and really kind of build a whole community governance type section into the wallet that makes it a lot easier to understand, because that's probably one of the biggest complaints right now is the wallet does almost everything, but you need to understand what those things are before it makes any sense to you. It's not that friendly.
Yeah, but I find that it's getting better every single day. And once again, that boils down to the kind of what I was saying. You guys are just constantly developing it and working with the community in order to develop it, which is one of the things that I wrote. Now,
We're listening.
Yeah, you are. Clearly you are. And I watch you do it all the time. I might not be super active in your channel, but I'm like, I guess I'm a little bit of a lurker. So you can always kind of see as I'm scrolling through because my name pops up and, and then, phew. But no, I watch you guys and I see what you guys do and it's impressive. I wanted to talk about smart contracts, right? I know you guys are heavily involved with smart contracts. Where is the future of smart contracts on EOS heading? And what are some of the things that we could potentially do with smart contracts in the future?
Yeah, so I've actually built a couple smart contracts now. For example, the producer JSON one is one that I whipped together. It's actually a fairly simple smart contract, but I've been looking into what the abilities you can do with these things are now, and it really is limitless at this point. It's like a full Turing complete program that you can just inject into the EOS system, and it's going to be really cool to see where this goes, especially because we've seen it before in like Solidity in Ethereum, but what ended up happening was it takes an entire ecosystem to support a new language. But with EOS, it's written in C or C++ or whatever, this variant basically. And what you get out of that is this basically the most commonly used language in the world for programming is now available on this platform. And that's going to be huge. So what I anticipate happening is a lot of people recognizing this, coming over and trying to think about their applications in a more decentralized manner. So the future, as I see might happen, is people are going to understand, okay, how can I start taking something from the centralized model and putting that in an application that's decentralized? And it's going to take a while for people to get this, and you're going to see a lot of people who think they've got it but have actually done something wrong. So there's going to be a learning curve, and there's going to be momentum, and eventually we'll get there. What I want to see in the future of it is a lot more automation. So right now we're relying on trusted third parties to do forms of automation, and a lot of that is actually in the financial world too. So we have things like an accountant who does something for us when we're doing business, or a tax person who calculates everything and does it and makes sure that all the forms are filled out. And these are things that can be automated. We've just never had the proper tools to do that yet. So those two big ones, accountant and taxes, you can see who I don't like interacting with already, right? Legal stuff is going to be put on the blockchain. So you could have contracts that are enforceable by code rather than by people or organizations. So things like an escrow contract are going to be huge, I think. And I'll stop my spiel on smart contracts. I don't want to take up too much time, but there's lots of opportunity there.
I love the excitement and I love the enthusiasm. And I think that people are just starting to realize that, what the capabilities are of some of these things. And once again, everything from law to agreements, it's kind of a new way of making enforceable agreements, and in a way in which everybody agrees to the contract before, and things happen as they should. So it's got a ton of potential, 100%. I'm going to ask you one of the hard questions because I always like to do this. I want to know what is kind of like the good, the bad, and the ugly of being a block producer.
I think I can tackle that one. The great thing about being a block producer is that you're voluntarily filling a role in which you're kind of your own boss, being your own company, and doing something and being a part of something that you want to see succeed. The bad is just how much there is to do. There is so much to do, it's ridiculous. And the ugliest part of it is, and it's not necessarily bad, but it's that there are a lot of people that are more interested in their own financials than they are in the innovation of the technology. They all have their place. And they all are just something that we're going to have to learn to live with as block producers, but could be better.
Yeah, it's probably pretty hard when somebody's putting in as much effort as you guys are to take a look around and see some people who have some maybe other intrinsic motivations. We won't get into who we might think some of those people are, of course, but I definitely, like, I see the point, man. Everybody's going to do their piece and everybody's going to do their part if we want to get this thing to where it's going to go. And I think maybe some people are short-sighted in the sense that even if they're financially motivated, you got to build this thing and you got to make it better and you've got to work together and you've got to make things happen. You got to contribute, or else you're standing there. You're just kind of you're a fly on the wall doing what you got to do to scrape some money together when you could be spending some energy to make things better and perhaps even receive a better financial reward. But we won't get into kind of some of the mechanics of that. I do want to ask another really important point, of course, about being a block producer is that you're always like you're always in a vote. It's just a constant, it's a constant battle for votes, and it's a constant battle for recognition to stay on the top, because I know that a lot of the money that you guys receive actually goes back into the ecosystem itself, and it goes into development, and you need these funds in order to be able to keep doing what you love to do. So how stressful is that? What have you guys really nailed with that process? And what do you think perhaps you could be doing a little bit better?
It's somewhat stressful. We're kind of used to it, being involved in other DPoS blockchains. It is a continuous cycle with periods where you're not in, periods where you're in the top. It's really hard to gauge. It's really hard to plan out what you're going to do with revenue and how to invest that back into the ecosystem when you don't know how much it's actually going to be. Because it could change at a moment's notice based on somebody else's vote, Sorry, my brain's in like 4 different places right now.
I'll help. So one of the things to expand on your point is it's on the financial aspects. So for example, when you're in the top 21, you basically make double what someone just underneath would, like in position 22. And we've been bouncing like up and down between those two right now. So week 1, we're like, ooh, we should purchase, a new rack in a data center and set up an API node with this much recurring costs and this much fixed cost. And then the next day you're out of the top 21. You're like, oh, maybe we can do a half rack now and do half the API infrastructure that we had planned. And then the next week you're back in, you're like, okay, I give up. I don't know what I'm going to do. So you have to be very careful with how you're planning finances. And that brings you into an interesting structure about how a block producer finances actually work. And that is that you often put the money first and do the thing first, and you get the reward later. And it's a strange thing that doesn't really happen in traditional markets, is that there's no guarantee of that reward. So you'll put in all this effort and time and you'll spend money and build things, and you may or may not get votes out of it. And those votes determine your worth. So it's this weird revenue model where you're trying to be perceived as doing good, and then that affects your revenue more so than the actual product itself, like it would in a traditional market.
Yeah, it's got to be quite the roller coaster. And I know how hard you guys work, and I know how much you guys contribute. So I really hope that people take the time to not only kind of watch this interview, but read up on a lot of the stuff that you guys are doing, which we'll kind of explore a little bit more, because you guys do work hard. You do give a lot back, and that's pretty obvious to myself and a lot of the community. I want to know, is there somebody in the space that you just really admire, that you just, that you really respect, whether it's a mentor or whether it's somebody you work with? Who might that person be?
I don't know that I could name just one person. I mean, we both have been involved in quite a few different blockchain and distributed ledger technology spaces, and there's a massive volume of people in this space that all deserve a lot of respect. I don't know that I've been involved in a space that has this much talent. I don't know if that is indicative of the EOS itself, or if that is hype, or if that is just accessibility to be a part of it. But it's unique in that way, and I'm not saying it's unique from my perspective in that way. There could be other projects that I'm not involved in that have just the same amount of sheer talent involved. It's just I haven't seen them.
For me, one of the things I really like about the block production strategy of this model is that you get all these block producers that have huge talent involved with them that come and basically apply for working with the space. And it's really cool to see that talent. And I personally don't think you see the same thing with other systems simply because the reward model is different. It's from, for example, mining instead of for election based. So I think that gives you this huge list of, like Aaron is saying, too much to really enumerate, because if I say one block producer, I'm going to have to say them all too, to be fair, and that's going to take a while. But on that note, there is a few people, like for example, I really admire Bart Wyatt from Block One. He's been extremely helpful in terms of engagement with the block producers on how the fundamentals of EOS works. I've really appreciated that. It's really nice to have people who really are in the know, like, communicate with the rest of the development platform, basically. So if you needed a name, there's one at least.
Yeah, it's hard to leave everybody out. I asked that question. It's a tough question to answer because you don't want anybody to feel like you don't appreciate them. And then the next thing you know, you've got a list of 300 people and we're 3 hours into the interview. So I totally get it, man. I appreciate it and I respect it. It's a very political answer, but it's also a very accurate answer because there is a lot of talent in the space and a lot of people work really, really hard. So I really do get it. I think adoption is definitely coming to EOS. I think it's happening every single day. But I also think that one of the things, in my opinion, I'm not a developer, of course, but just my opinion, that we really need to focus on is just like user interfaces that a monkey could run. You know what I mean? Just nice, simple, sleek user interfaces, because ultimately mass adoption means adoption by everybody, my grandma, my brother, you know what I mean? How does that kind of factor into your everyday activities and maybe some of the projects that you're involved in?
I think it's kind of our stance on this is that the fundamentals need to be really solid before you can make the user interface great for users. That's kind of been the approach we've taken. It's like for the wallet, for example, we don't have a great interface for it, and it's not that user friendly, but it's fundamentally we're improving it every time we make a new release. We talk about the user interface regularly, and we're starting to get a good grasp on like what it would mean to build a really good user interface for mass adoption that anyone would be able to understand and anybody would be able to use. But every time we start like driving down that path a little bit, we find something fundamental that needs to be changed first before we can actually accomplish that. So we completely agree that it all needs to be great and easy and simple and understandable for the everyday user. The fundamentals just aren't quite there yet. You can see that with the APIs and the history plugin, that's going on right now. How do people access their historical data? There's a lot more technical, like some of the specific APIs that need to be improved before we can hit that point. There's just things we can't do to build what we think would be the perfect interface at this point. So we'll get there. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
I just want to reiterate that this was not a shot at the Greymass wallet. The Greymass wallet, I walk in there. It's not. I find it very easy to use. I think you guys do great work. I walk in, I input my private key, I have everything. I click send,
right,
and it goes. So
we're the ones taking the shot at it.
Yeah, I know. I'm a fan. I think it's pretty easy to use, and you guys are constantly updating it. So it wasn't like I don't know. I think you guys are doing a good job, and I think like Aaron, you bring up a really good point. Like things have got to work before you can get them to work on a scale where a monkey can use them. But I'm a fan of the wallet, man. I think you guys are doing well. I really do. Like you put in your private key, and you've got a wallet, and it's there, and it's easy.
Right. Yeah, and we really like we like the wallet. It's just we are trying to be critical with it, so that way we know what we need to improve with it. So we are probably our biggest critics at this point.
Yeah, well, that's always the way it is, really, right? And that's kind of drives us to be a little bit better. But yeah, no, I get it, man. I like it. I want to talk to you guys. We're actually going to talk about APIs, and I want you to kind of break them down a little bit for people who might be watching who don't understand what an API is. But before I go there, I want to talk about dapps, because that's kind of a segue from what we're talking about with adoption. What would you guys say? I know it might be kind of a loaded question again, and I'm okay with whatever answer you give me. What are your top kind of 3 favorite, or at least most interesting dapps in the ecosystem right now?
So dapps is an interesting thing because a lot of people don't fully grasp the concept of what a dapp is and what's a dapp, what's an app. And I actually wrote a few blog articles on this. So if you get a chance to read them, go check me out on Steemit. But what I do want to say is that the most important dapp for EOS is EOS. There's no question about it, because EOS is itself a dapp. It's a decentralized application, and the currency system in EOS is the dapp of EOS. And that's how everything works, and that's how everything functions. And so you just can't avoid that. That's going to be number 1. Number 2 is going to be an interesting one that doesn't sound very interesting, but let me explain why. Number 2 is going to be a smart contract that can create an account for you. And this seems like a trivial thing, right? It's just like, who cares? You just built this tiny little contract that you send money to it and creates a new account. What's the big deal? Okay, let me explain. In regular blockchains where you have this proof of work model, there's no concept of an account. You have this unspent transaction set, basically, and that's how Bitcoin and Ethereum works right now. And there's no real account. Like when you send money to and from a private key, basically, and you don't need to have permission to send money to a private key. In EOS and in Steem and these other models that are account-based, your private key is attached to this account, and when you can't just send to a private key. If you want to send from Alice to Bob has to say, okay, this is my account. But if Bob doesn't have an account, he can't receive money. And that's a permissioned aspect of the system that's actually really problematic, is that if Bob's not in the ecospace, he can't receive EOS. That's huge. However, EOS solves this problem with smart contracts. Bob can say, this is my private key, send money to this smart contract that will create my account and send it to my private key, which is now my account. That's huge. And most people don't realize how huge that is that it's removed the permissioned aspect of sending money from someone to another person in a trustless way. You don't need to trust the third party creating an account because it's a smart contract on the blockchain. That to me just like blew my mind when I realized how important that was. And honestly, okay, that's 2 big ones. And my third answer is going to be kind of lackluster because I don't really have a third top dapp because they're still works in progress. I think DEXs are going to be eventually my number 3. But for now, I guess I'll have to go with the betting platforms simply because they're driving adoption. And that's really what we need right now. So it's super cool when people realize, hey, we can do decentralized betting and gambling on a platform without a house. Because you don't need the house to say who wins, because you can do it because the blockchain tells you who wins. And that's, people are realizing it's starting to click. Oh, I don't need a middleman to tell me who won. I can do that in a model that has me to you betting on some outcome and no one saying who won but the system. And that's super cool.
I don't think it's lackluster. I was kind of conflicted. Like, I'm just going to be perfectly upfront. I was like, betting games on EOS. But you bring up such a good point, man. Like, adoption. And it's come to the point now where, of course, I'm not like a big bettor, but I've seen how popular these things are. And I have made a couple of little investments just to be like perfectly clear. And man, like some of the transactions that we're getting from some of these things are huge. They really are. So I've really kind of done a 360 on my attitude towards a lot of these betting dapps, and now it's like I kind of like sussing them out now myself and just like checking out the different systems and how they're organized, because there's a lot of work that goes into some of the ways that these things are thought out. So yeah, no, I get it, man. It makes perfect sense to me. I can recognize that for sure. I guess I want to get into APIs really quickly. Let's talk about, like, this is a hard one and I don't even think it's going to be possible, but if you were to try to like explain an API to like your 12-year-old nephew. How in the simplest terms possible for anybody who's not involved in EOS and maybe somebody who isn't super technical, would you go about that?
I would say it's a server that an app or a DApp can use to get information and submit information. Like it's kind of your on-ramp and off-ramp to some sort of ecosystem.
That's a great answer. I really didn't think that you could simplify it like that, but it's fantastic. I know you guys do a lot of work with APIs. I know that you guys have been putting a lot of time in on APIs. Why are APIs important to you? Why does it matter to the ecosystem? And why do they matter to EOS?
We're experienced with this from our various other work. So that's one of the reasons we're kind of heavily involved in it. We're investing in new hardware as well as R&D in terms of better APIs, better performance of it, better APIs, and like what kinds of hardware runs this kind of stuff the best. So our API is probably one of the most used in EOS right now. When I was looking at it earlier, we were serving close to 15,000 requests a second. If you use some sort of EOS DApp, it's a good chance that it uses one of our APIs. And we do this because we think it's important to serve this information. We think more people should be doing it as well. I mean, block producers should be all over this. It's important because the more points, like the more endpoints you have available, the more resilient the network's going to be. And this kind of goes back to some of what Scott was talking about earlier, and he dove into a little bit in his blog posts about the importance of the decentralization of these endpoints. Like we may be one really important source right now, but it shouldn't remain that way. What happens if our server fails for some reason or one of our data centers goes offline? Like we need for people to continue to use EOS, whether they're using one of those betting dapps, a DEX, a wallet, a block explorer, like whatever you're interacting with, those all use the API ecosystem out there. So it's the part of the critical foundation that EOS needs to keep running.
Yeah, and that's kind of when I spoke about the unsung heroes of EOS. That's really what I wanted to highlight in this interview. It's a lot of these things that you guys are doing right now that are absolutely crucial to the ecosystem. And because it's not Moon and it's not like, it's not shiny and it's not this and it goes on in the background, I just don't think that you guys get enough accolades for that. So maybe I'm not necessarily a representative of the community, but I would hope that some people would support me when I thank you guys for all the work that you have done in that regard, because I do understand how important it is, and I think that you guys should get a lot more credit for some of the work that you do, and you definitely block producers should be stepping up and supporting you in that. So thank you guys so much for that. Really appreciated. And yeah, it's one of those things, that I'm talking.
We're happy to do it, and honestly, we get some joy out of nerding out over like some of the new tech that we get to play with. Like I have a server that we just built sitting behind me right now that's running benchmarks on EOS right now, and then it's fun to look at how it's like building a little hot rod EOS hybrid thing. So we get some joy out of it, but yeah, it's just super important.
Little hot rod. It is. I think the whole terminology, like the whole thought of like nerds or this or that is kind of, I think the whole terminology, and I'm just going to go on a tangent because screw it. It's my show. I'm doing it. But I think the whole like alpha male mentality is changing because as people start to realize that, you know what I mean? That intelligence, resources, and innovation is really a lot more important than a lot of the other things that kind of like the traditional world might have, described as like, as more of like I think that the stuff that you guys are doing, like people can call it nerds, whatever. But the truth of the matter is that people who may be labeled nerds save the world and do a lot of the important stuff and push us in the right direction. So I think that the world's kind of waking up to that. I like to see the fact that the world, and one of the reasons why I do these interviews is that the world is waking up to people who are in technology, people who are doing the important things behind the scene, entrepreneurs, guys in cryptocurrency. You guys are becoming like the new rock stars, you know what I mean? And our whole, it's very true. People want to know what you're doing. They want to know about you. They want to get to know you. And I think that that's good. I think it's really important that people, that the way that we're like thinking about kind of whatever it might be, you know, like nerds or, you know, whatever it might be is just definitely evolving in the sense that people are starting to realize that technology is important. Technology is cool. And technology is going to rule the world. So I don't think that it's nerding out. I have a pretty varied interests, kind of, you know, a dichotomy of interest myself. And I think that's really cool. I hope that you guys continue to quote unquote nerd out because it's important for the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In the next 2 years, I want to know what's kind of like your perfect definition of success for Greymass. Like what would be like, yeah, I've made it, or I'm happy. Like what would kind of really define success for you guys in the EOS ecosystem?
Being in the top 21. No, I'm kidding. It's an important one for us to, you know, it's a matter of self-pride the higher we are, of course. But I think success is more so tied to EOS's success. I think the further we can drive EOS adoption, the further we can build EOS itself and the things that you can do with EOS is going to be a huge metric of success. You know, it's the growing the pie itself, not your slice of the pie, right? And if the whole pie gets bigger, of course your slice gets bigger, but that's not what you should be concerned about, because the big pie, as it grows, is going to start taking over the world. And that's really what's going to be success for us, is if we can get that success in the whole world. But to bring it back, I cover the grandiose part to us as an organization. We want to do more software, more hardware, of course. We want to have some really cool products that we'll have launched. We want to have our name brand, you know, more well recognized for the services that we provide. You know, utility in what we're providing, adoption of our services like our API node. People are going to recognize us and say, hey, there you have the fastest response time. They've got servers all over the world that just service our requests, and it's great because it's fantastic, and they're not even paid because they're paid as a block producer instead. So you don't have to pay to use these API nodes, which is great. It's not what you get at Google. They give you an hourly rate, right? So this kind of thing is going to be something success, just driving that adoption of both our services as well as EOS as a whole.
Yeah, that's really well put, and I get it. And it boils down to a lot of the other things that we were talking about before, right? When you contribute to the EOS ecosystem, the slice of the pie gets bigger. So it's just kind of a roundabout to that. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's kind of a loaded question, because the truth of the matter is I know the answer. Otherwise, I wouldn't be taking my time to interview you guys. I'm already a big fan. You guys already have my vote. But if somebody was maybe perhaps new to EOS, and they were to kind of look up Greymass, why should they ultimately, you know, vote for Greymass, and how important is it to be able to vote in order to contribute to the EOS ecosystem?
I think if you are a stakeholder and you are using the ecosystem more so than if you're just a guy who has 10 EOS on an exchange. But if you're actually using the platform, voting is incredibly important, because it's used, like those block producer spots are used to basically fund organizations that are improving the space, which is a unique model that DPoS has over things like Bitcoin. I mean, you don't see Bitcoin miners hiring developers to improve the core protocol. All they want to do is buy more hardware to make more money. Whereas with this continuous election system, like, you're voting in people like Scott and I and our team, or you're voting in any of the other block producers based on their contributions and their reliability to help maintain the network. If I'd have to list some reasons as to, why us, I think our experience in the space, we've been in crypto for years now. That's a big selling point. If you look back at the problems that we have attempted to and solved already, we've been contributing in that way. And some of that stuff gets really technical and hard to understand, but people still point them out either way. And just our focus on trying to advance things rather than just, like, we're not going out and saying, hey, we're releasing a token and, we're not like boilerplate copying other people and just dropping things in. I think those are some decent reasons, and participating in the governance of EOS is probably one of the most important things you can do if you care about EOS, just because it's what's going to shape EOS moving forward.
Yeah. So Aaron talked a bit about one side of the model, which is the organizational aspects. Which organization should I vote for? I'll talk a bit about the other side of the model, which is actually the trust side of the model. So we elect these producers into EOS based on their contributions and whatnot. But one of the fundamental reasons you should vote for a block producer is because you are delegating your responsibility of securing EOS to this person. And I mean EOS itself as a fundamental system. So the block producers that get elected are the ones who run the consensus. So if you're thinking about governance, these are the people that ensure that things are on lock, are trusted, and consensus is flowing smoothly, that we do get a representation of the will of EOS people enacted in EOS. So that trust is really, really important. You need to make sure that you're voting for people who will respect the model of distributed consensus, who will push for decentralization and not centralization, and who will make sure that governance is respected and followed. So when you're voting for people, you need to make sure, does this block producer, do I trust them to do the right thing when there's a contentious issue? That should be one of the things that should be at the top of your list when you're thinking about it. And I think us as an organization, we've already shown this. We don't just say we've shown that we are trustable. We've shown it for years in Steam. We have that background of experience that says, hey, we've done this GPOS model before. We know how this system works, and we know how to keep it organized and keep it decentralized and keep it going smoothly.
Yeah, and the proof is in the pudding. Look at all the work that you guys have done already, and honestly, it's an honor to be able to sit here and hopefully try to showcase some of that and talk about some of that, because I know you guys are pretty busy just working and getting things done in the background. We've been trying to set this up for a while, and I know it was only the only reason why it didn't happen is just because you guys are going nonstop. So I do think people should definitely give you guys a vote. I think that you guys contribute a lot, and I appreciate what you guys do, and I know a lot of other people do too.
We appreciate that support.
No, for sure. I know you guys do. And reasonably speaking, like I've spoken about this before too, it doesn't really matter how many EOS you have. If you have 30 EOS, vote those EOS, because the people that you're voting for are getting paid in proportion to the amount of votes. Every little bit matters. So it's important to maintain that and know that. And I think there's a lot of voter apathy. And I think that to think that just because you don't have a lot of EOS, it doesn't matter is an incorrect assumption. And it's not accurate, because you really are helping feed the ecosystem by choosing the right people.
Absolutely.
So to move on to something completely off the wall from that, I want to know, what would you say the most influential book you've ever read is?
I'll take this one with a pair. So when I was in high school, I read in an English class 1984 by George Orwell, followed by Brave New World by Huxley. And it was interesting to read them back to back, because when you read the two of them, the first one tells you about what is kind of this abuse of authority, and then the second one tells you about an abuse of freedom. And it's so interesting to see those back to back, because you see what can go wrong when you have too much of one thing. And I really, really like that dichotomy, and I really like seeing, okay, if we go down the path of releasing our freedom, it's bad. And then if we go down the path of taking all freedom for ourselves, you can harm yourself if you're not careful. And so I really, really like that juxtaposition. And basically, you need to find a balance between the two of them. And I think that mindset has really given me like some insight into how I want to structure things, like not even just in my life, but like how I view governance and in general, is that you need to find solutions, and the solutions are not simple. Like, and you make it too simple, and you're going to make problems for yourself. So those are my favorites and most influential books, is that pair.
Yeah, I have read both of them. Brave New World is probably one of my favorite books. Just this dystopian society that kind of runs in the future. I like Huxley is, in my opinion, one of the best writers of all times, and Orwell, of course, amazing. So it's funny you should say that, because I think we have some similar tastes. Aaron, I guess more than just money, right? We're not just moving money around anymore with EOS, right? What problems could EOS really solve in the future above and beyond simple financial transactions?
Trust. I mean, smart contracts allow you to create situations with people that you don't have to trust. Like, that is kind of the ultimate benefit of things like these smart contracts. Right now, we have so many layers of laws and courts and financial system. Well, I guess that goes back to financial, but we have so much arbitration in our world that could be essentially automated through things like smart contracts. And that's because we no longer have to trust each other, for the most part, that things will be the way they're set out. Like, we are programming trust, essentially. And that is completely that kind of leads back to the financial, like EOS can help with money things in the future. But like, if you look at the actual money issue, what it boils down to again is trust.
Yeah, and I think for me, DACs are really interesting as well. You know what I mean? Building these kind of centralized organizations that can govern in ways based on the power and the consensus of the people. It was kind of something that I was really, I know they've been around since, the days of cavemen, but it was something that I was really kind of just struck, we'll say maybe even slapped in the face with when I got into EOS. And it's probably one of the most fascinating things in just this new organizational structure that's really kind of popping up within EOS, and the ability to change not only just money, but the way that we make collective decisions and operate in groups. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you guys if you could transmit one message to every computer screen in the world, what would that be?
I don't have a great answer for this. Scott, do you have anything?
I don't have a funny answer nor a great answer. Vote Greymass is the obvious one, but
vote Greymass.
But I feel like there's some cool things that you could do if you had that ability. Some funny ones might be like, your computer is hacked, please send 5 Bitcoin to this address. Which would be funny because it's just a message and not an actual hack, but I don't know. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, I think mine, and I've talked about this before in previous interviews, because I asked these questions, I always think about it myself. Mine would just be like, it's going to be okay. That would be it, because everybody stresses and worries about stuff that's happening in life, and none of it matters. Like, sometimes I just go out, I'm in Costa Rica, and I just stare up at the stars, and I just, for like 15 minutes, and it's going to be okay, man. Like, everything's fine.
Yep.
Man, I feel if you send that, all the computer nerds are going to be like, no, it's not okay. My computer's hacked.
Oh, computer's going out the door. No.
Got to get rid of this one.
Exactly. This thing's broken, clearly. Anyway, all jokes aside, guys, I'm going to definitely take the time to list all your resources below, all your links, all your Steemit posts, all your blog posts, because you guys do some really, really thought-provoking stuff. And I think that people really need to take the time to realize kind of what you guys are doing behind the scenes. I'm a huge fan. I will continue to be. Did you guys have any final thoughts for the EOS community before I send you guys on your way?
The thing that I think I'd like most people to realize is how early we are in this process. If I can leave one thing for people to think about, is just think about how we are months in at this of this entire process. We just saw Bitcoin's 10th year come about, and we're on like month 5. We're still really early, and a lot of things need to be done. If you can help with things, absolutely try to help with things. But we're going to hit some bumps in the road, and some unfortunate things will probably happen in the future, and things may not be the best the way they are now. But like we're still early on. Like that's important to remember.
We're early, but the fundamentals are sound, and that's the important part. When you first saw Bitcoin come out, people were like, this system is serious and it has serious potential. It took a while for people to latch onto that, and we're going to see the same thing here, because this system is serious and it has the potential, and it's just going to take time because the human world is slower compared to the digital world, and the adoption curve is going to take a while to come into fruition, but it'll happen. It'll happen.
It's a great parting message, guys. Scott, Aaron, I'm glad we finally got together to do this. Once again, I'm going to put all your links in the post below, and I appreciate your time today. I want to thank you guys on behalf of the community for everything that you guys do, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. So please keep up the good work, and I look forward to chatting with you guys sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us on. Like, this was a good conversation.
Absolutely. A pleasure as always, gents. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.